You ever feel like you've just been online for too long? Not online too much in the sense of you look at your phone too much, but just too long in the sense of years. Like every once in a while, I really realize that I've been on Twitter for like 15 years and that this has been how I've been viewing the world and taking in information. And the thought pops into my head that I've been doing this for too long and this is no good anymore. It really happens, especially when there's like a big news story, breaking news, and I happen to be looking at Twitter right when it happens because there's a feeling of familiarity to all of it because I've been through this too many times now. I've seen the news cycle play out too many times and it starts to feel repetitive. And you kind of feel like no matter how shocking the news is, I've done this before. This all feels familiar. Like there's a moment when the thing happens and you start seeing the reactions before you actually find out the actual news, just because of the way, a timeline works. So you start seeing posts where it's just somebody saying, wow, this is wild. What's going on in the world? And then maybe 5 minutes later, after some digging, you finally get to kind of an unconfirmed news source. Some weird small account that's posting something that everybody is retweeting. And so you kind of start getting a feel of what's actually happening. And I'm clicking back to, New York Times, CNN to try to get confirmation. Eventually, they confirm it. And so then, their post starts getting shared. And eventually that first wave of, wow, this is crazy. What's happening? That starts to go away as the story becomes more clear. And then what you get, and we're talking, 10 minutes later, is the takes start coming in. People start feeling out their position of this is my stance on what happened. And because it's Twitter, you start seeing extreme stances being taken pretty early. People are staking out their position on the fringes. And it becomes a competition from that point of here's where I am. Who's further? Who's further to the left? Who's further to the right on this? And that becomes a competition of who wants attention more. So what starts off as a fringe stance gets kind of pushed towards the middle. And eventually people start going further. And you start seeing reactions to reactions. People condemning each other. And it's not just that they're taking stances, but you feel it's almost like they're selecting from a menu of canned reactions. And people start playing characters. There is the guy who finds all of this hilarious. That's kind of one of the early takes that people have is just uproarious laughter. And they cannot stop laughing at the hilarity of the situation and at everybody else's reactions to it. This is not genuine laughter. I think we all kind of know that at this point. This is, a performance of laughter. It's a statement of, I don't take this seriously. And this is something that is funny to me. But I can tell you, as a stand-up comedian, it is hard to make people to laugh. People don't laugh uproariously, uncontrollably, at the mere conveyance of a news story. Just telling somebody what happened, they don't start rolling on the ground laughing. They might not take it seriously, but them telling you that they're laughing uncontrollably, that is just a statement in itself. They're just telling you how they feel. So there is the laughing person, and then there's also the angry response, the rage response, all caps, and it's this really unlocked some sort of demon in them, and they are condemning the laughing person. And there's a couple other, I would say, archetypes, which is what's weird now is that because we've gone this far into, media, is that there's some responses you see which are like, it's almost like a corporate response where there's just some kind of smaller account, but you'll see them posting something like, I condemn this. I condemn political violence. And this country needs to come together because this is not what the founding fathers wanted. And you're reading it and it's like, well, was this like Microsoft? Well, who are you talking to? That is one of the reactions, though, is people feel like I need to be seen saying something right now. And it's almost like this style of posting to me, it's like you're posting, but you don't actually want to be seen. You're trying to hide behind sort of bland corporate speak. So that's one of the options, is this weird, PR statement that you're making. But the point I'm trying to make with all of these canned responses is that they're not a genuine expression of how somebody feels. Because, look, the news story just broke 15 minutes ago. You haven't really had time to process how you feel. So instead of taking that time, because you feel the need to post, to add something to the conversation, instead of taking a second to think about how you really feel, you are grasping. And, hey, this feels like a take. I got to throw this out there because you don't want to miss out on the conversation. So instead of genuine expression, what you get instead is branding. What you get is people thinking, what is something that I would say about this? What does my brand, how do I fit into the conversation? According to this account that I've built up over the years, what is the expected response? What is consistent with everything else I've said? Because that is the ultimate sin online, is inconsistency. You said one thing in the past, now you're saying something different. Did you change your mind or did you just not mean it the first time? That is a sign of dishonesty. And it is an accusation that just tears people up. But what's so funny is that, there's something that happens to me sometimes in restaurants where this has been happening my whole life. I order food and then immediately I just forget what I ordered. It's a weird amnesia I have. So, 15 minutes later, there's a server standing next to the table with a bunch of entrees, and they're asking what I got, and I have no idea what I got. So I have to ask myself the question, what seems like something I would order? What was Dan from 15 minutes thinking? Knowing myself, what seems like a meal from the menu that sounds good? And it's like, I don't know, chicken sandwich. That sounds like Dan. So that's what I end up taking. And that's what people do online because they can't process this kind of information this quickly. So they default to what seems like something I would say. And so that's why everything feels so repetitive. That's why when a news story breaks, you already know what you're going to see online. None of this is ever actually surprising because everybody is just kind of reaching into their bag and playing out their brand for the world. But the problem with this is that we all feel ourselves playing out our brand, and yet we look out into everybody else. And I mean, we also know that everybody else is doing this. We know that nobody can really come up with a thoughtful take in 5 minutes. So people look out into the world and they see, the mainstream media. And it's like, okay, these people have an agenda. They cannot really be trusted because they're just following their brand. They're just playing to their audience. You look around and you see, who are the big accounts, people you follow and you're familiar with over the years. And it's like, okay, this person is also playing up their brand. So this is kind of fake. But look, the internet's all we have. Twitter is all you have. So you got to find your information somewhere. So instead of believing what it is you see from the mainstream media or from the big influencer accounts, I think what people end up doing is they just put too much of their trust in random accounts. There is a weird cognitive bias I think people have to sources that they are unfamiliar with. Weirdly, the thing you end up trusting online, and this is why the internet is so chaotic and ultimately untrustworthy, is that we default to believing in anonymous accounts, to screenshots from Reddit, to weird stuff that pops up in the replies. Because for some reason, people think these people have nothing to gain from this. Because this is Reddit, because this is an anonymous account with not a lot of followers and they're not monetized, this person's telling the truth. And this person is a reflection of what the world actually feels right now. And obviously, this is absurd because, there's a kind of logic people have of why would this person lie? That's almost the default people have when they see a small account of this person has nothing to gain from this. Why would they lie? But just philosophically, the question of why would they lie makes just as much sense as why would they tell the truth? What do they have to gain from any of this? And obviously, look, this small account has just as much reason to lie as anybody else. That is the internet. That is the nature of the beast. But the problem is that if you are seeing the world through social media, you do got to trust something. And if this is your only source of information, you can't be distrustful all the time. You can't be skeptical 100% of the time because something's got to get in there. So I think what people really do overall in terms of how they start to view the world and how they form a consensus of, all right, what's the world thinking right now? What is everybody's response in aggregate? That ends up being taken as genuine. Even though we are rightfully skeptical of individual accounts and we think we can spot bias and fake news, for some reason we feel like in aggregate there is a real view that can be, ascertained from everything as a whole, which is absurd because, poison in, poison out. You're starting off with bad information, but thinking that you can start to divine the truth from it. And I think The answer to all of this, and I mean, I think this feels kind of obvious. The answer to all of this is something that I think we kind of knew about the internet instinctively early on. Go back to early internet, pre-social media. We knew that this was not supposed to be a serious place. The internet was supposed to be a place of experimentation and entertainment and just kind of exploring weird stuff. This was not supposed to be the place of posting something that says, I condemn political violence. God bless America. It's like, no, that was a creation of the modern era. And it was something that got invented out of necessity, not out of genuine expression. So the answer is to not take the internet seriously. There is nothing about this technology that we all have that forces us to be serious, to be genuine all the time. We can just acknowledge that this is a performance and be okay with that. Acknowledge that what you're seeing online is not a genuine reflection of the world. It is distorted. It is make-believe. It's all for play. And within that, we can be serious sometimes, and we can be genuine. But we don't have to be consistent to what we were before. We don't have to play out our brands and be on brand and worry about not contradicting ourselves, because what do we even have to gain from any of that? There's something people say sometimes when they're in stupid arguments online of like, you wouldn't say that to my face. Oh, you're saying that here, but if we were in person, you wouldn't be saying that. This is always very funny to me because, no, of course, nobody would be saying this in person. We're not in person. We're online. We're on the computer. Just you making that accusation of you wouldn't say this to my face, that is a kind of tacit acknowledgement that this platform is separate from real life. And when we're here, when we are on the internet, we're not in real life. So what is the point of trying to hold real life standards to what is clearly us typing to each other on a website? That's all it is. And that's all we need it to be. There is no point to trying to make this the real world. Because clearly, if you look around, when you really go outside and, touch grass, as they say, you realize that the charged energy of the internet doesn't actually carry out into the real world. Some people want it to, and they try their best to carry these things out into the real world. But it doesn't hold up because what we're doing online is performance. And that's okay. It should be. I mean, look, if you went out to watch a play, somebody was, they're performing Hamlet, Shakespeare. You wouldn't say like, oh, that guy, he wouldn't kill his uncle in real life. No, this is fake. It's like, yeah, it's supposed to be fake. We're in the theater. We're all on stage right now. This is just for fun.